This video brought to you by JadedPainting.com. If you need your miniatures painted to a tabletop standard, check out JadedPainting.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the final part of this three-part painting tutorial in which I'm going to show you how I painted up this Cryx Kraken colossal model for the Cryx army. So I continued on all the metallic areas of the model with a shading of non-oil. This would be the equivalent to armor shading, or armor wash, sorry, from P3. The goal of this shade is to get in all the crevices and the recesses, and just to give it a more warm metallic look. Whenever doing metallics, I always do at least a base coat, a shade or wash, and at least one highlight, typically through dry brushing, sometimes even two highlights. Also, this non-oil shade will give a more matte appearance to these areas and reduce the glossy look from the gloss varnish. When applying shades or washes to large areas such as these, I typically use a brush like a fan brush, as you can see here, which has a very large surface area to volume ratio. That way you can get as much covered on your brush and just go quickly over these areas. It saves you a lot of time and produces a great look in the end. And when the wash was dry, I gave a dry brush highlight to all these areas as I mentioned with Quicksilver. If you don't have Quicksilver, I recommend Iron Breaker from Games Workshop. And I love dry brushing these areas just because it just gives that really nice dusted appearance to all these metallic areas and makes the edges really pop and stand out. Now another option, if you wanted to produce a more rusty appearance on these areas, you could have done a red wash combined with the black wash. So I was using non-oil and Caribird Crimson, or you can use Agrax Earthshade and non-oil, which would produce a dirtier metallic appearance. Either way, I just decided to keep them a little more pristine in this condition because I already went really old on the rest of the body. I just wanted some contrast, so I just used non-oil. After the metallics were done, I decided to start on all the vents for the furnace by using the Games Workshop color WAAPSTONE Glow. It's a really nice mid-tone green, and the goal is to build up a gradient of colors from the darkest on the centers towards the lightest on the outside. So for the first step, I would just water down. I used technically thinner, but I watered down the WAAPSTONE Glow just to get a nice even coverage over the entire surface of all the vents. And as you can see here, I'm working on the back vents at the moment. And when that was complete, I then worked a gradient from the outside towards the inside with MOOT green. I used, once again, very watered down MOOT green, and I just put a little bit on each end and then dragged my brush towards the center to build up a nice gradient. And I feathered this approach several times, just to produce a nice gradient towards dark green in the center and light green on the exteriors. As you can see, the nice gradient is already starting to really form in the center of these vents. Also, when trying to do the gradient, I tried to keep the center row lined up a little bit so it was a relatively consistent glowing pattern on these vents. And when the greens were done, I did one more really watered down coat with CYGNUS yellow, and I just used the yellow at the very ends of the vents, and it was very watered down, so it would just brighten up the greens a little bit at the ends while keeping the really nice dark green in the center. And this leads to a really nice gradient with very little time spent. And after I was done this on the back vents, I then repeated this process on all of the little vents. And this is what the model looked like when all of the vents were complete. And as you can see, there's a really nice gradient on all of them, and I worked towards the center of each one with the dark green. Next, I used another product by AK Interactive called Winter Streaking Grime. It is a really nice based product in which you can just create very nice realistic streaks. So with a very thin brush, I just did vertical lines using this Winter Streaking Grime, starting out a little thick. The goal is to start a little thicker than you want to go in the end. And I just did these horizontal lines, these vertical lines just down all the front of the model, especially building up towards places like oil runoffs. Winter Streaking Grime is a nice dark green. And then what I did was, after doing these patterns, I dipped my brush back in mineral spirits and then used the mineral spirits to thin down the lines to a really realistic thinness pattern. And as you can see, then it really does thin them out and shortens them so that they look much thinner and they're much shorter, and this produces a really nice worn, grimy appearance on the top of this model. With streaking patterns like this, I tend to think actually less is more, so I did dull down a little bit more on the other side as well. So that way I didn't have all just grime patterns over it, but really overall just several streaks of grime will look really nice in this model and produce a really nice aged appearance. So here I am going over with the mineral spirits, just thinning down the lines and making sure that they look streaky and relatively thin. And that's it. You now know how I painted up this Cryx Kraken model. For the base, I just used some painted sand with a couple shades of brown and then some static grass, just to create some contrast with the model, and that is also what the client wished. And overall, I think it turned out really nicely, and I'm very happy with the way that it turned out. I think it looks really great and it'll be awesome on the tabletop. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Please like the video, comment in the comment section down below, and subscribe to my channel if you already haven't done so. It really does help a lot.